Happy National Day weekend from Singapore. While the rest of the island is prepping for massive stadium parades and fighter jet flyovers, I wanted to do something raw. I'm taking you on an uncut 10-minute-ish walk through the exact birthplace of modern Singapore. We are starting right here on the edge of the Singapore River. Today it's a pristine, beautiful tourist promenade. But if we were standing here a century ago, this water was choked wall to wall with wooden bumboats called twackos. You would see thousands of Chinese and Indian coolies. Their life wasn't defined by a standard clock. They were paid purely by the piece. They spent their days balancing massive 50-kilogram gunny sacks of rice, sugar and spices directly on their shoulders, walking them up from the water into the riverside warehouses. It was backbreaking work under a scorching tropical sun, and every single cent they earned to send back to their families depended on how many sacks their bodies could physically handle. The glittering skyscrapers you see towering over the financial district right now were built on the grit of those manual labourers. As we step away from the riverbank and head up toward the Civic buildings, you can literally feel how this water served as the engine room for the entire country. This is the Raffles landing site, marked by the iconic statue of Sir Stamford Raffles. He stepped ashore right on this bank on the 28th of January, 1819. Now, here is a bit of channel trivia for the Whatsanametravel community. This white statue is actually a copy. The original one is made of dark bronze and stands just a little further inland in front of the Victoria Concert Hall. But what's fascinating is how Singapore handles its colonial history. In many countries, statues of colonial rulers are torn down, but Singapore chose to keep Raffles standing. Why? Because the nation's founders looked at him not as a master, but as an economic catalyst. They recognized that when he declared Singapore a free, duty-free port, he set off the chain reaction that made this city a global trading giant. They owned the history instead of erasing it. Today, this is called the Arts House, but it holds the title of the absolute oldest surviving building in Singapore, dating back to 1827. Now, there is a brilliant piece of historical irony built into these walls. It was originally designed by colonial architect George Coleman as a lavish private mansion for a wealthy Scottish merchant named John Argyle Maxwell. But Maxwell never spent a single night inside his own house. A massive land dispute broke out because the government claimed the plot was reserved for state use. The colonial authorities swooped in, took it over and rented it out to use as a courthouse. Over the next century, this building lived a dozen completely different lives, serving as the Supreme Court, a wartime storehouse, and even a social welfare office. Now, if you look just across the green lawn over there, you'll see that massive, imposing structure with the grand columns. That is the National Gallery, Singapore. Today, it's a world-class art museum, but it's actually made by fusing two iconic monuments together, the historic City Hall and the old colonial Supreme Court. That building witnessed the official end of World War II in Singapore, and it's the exact spot where the nation's very first independent government was sworn into office. It is absolutely massive, and honestly, the sheer amount of history packed inside those walls deserves its own dedicated exploration. We will definitely save the National Gallery for another day. But its true legacy ignited right here on National Day weekend in 1965. This became the official Parliament House of a newly independent Singapore. Right behind those windows is the historic parliamentary chamber. That room is where founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew and the first generation of leaders sat for decades, passing the foundational laws that physically transformed a vulnerable tropical island into a global financial superpower. Moving forward, the path cuts straight through a massive architectural sandwich. This grand structure is the Asian Civilizations Museum, historically known as the Empress Place building. It was officially named all the way back in 1907 to honour Queen Victoria. There is a gritty story baked right into these white walls. Construction began in 1864 and it was entirely built using the hands of Indian convict labourers. The colonial engineer back then, a man named Major John McNair, actually ran the prison system like a construction school. He taught the inmates complex brickmaking and stone masonry, using their forced labour to lay down the literal foundations of this city. And just like the old parliament, the government completely changed its mind on what to do with it. It was fully designed to be a grand courthouse, but the minute it opened its doors in 1865, the colonial administration was growing so fast that the government secretariat immediately hijacked the space. For generations, locals just knew this as the core government offices. Rows of elegant French timber windows line the exterior. Long before air conditioning existed on this tropical island, those windows were a structural necessity designed to trap the cool breeze sweeping off the Singapore River to keep the bureaucrats inside from melting. But right across the path, the towering structure of the Victoria Theatre and Concert Hall holds an entirely different rhythm. What looks like one massive palace is actually two separate buildings joined together by that 54-metre clock tower right in the centre. The older half was built as a town hall back in 1862, while the Grand Memorial Hall was added decades later after the passing of Queen Victoria. But this place holds a deeply emotional connection for every Singaporean celebrating National Day this weekend. It is the spiritual home of the country's national identity. Back in 1958, a local composer named Zubair Saeed sat inside the concert hall and debuted a song called Majula Singapura, which translates to Onward Singapore. Just 1 year later, when the island gained self-governance, those exact lyrics and melody officially became the national anthem. Every single school child on the island has sung those words every morning since. Right out front is the open expanse of the Empress lawn. Today, it's a beautifully manicured green plaza used for outdoor art and festive weekend crowds, but historically, this lawn was the absolute epicenter of public life. It served as a massive colonial military parade ground, a cricket pitch, and the exact spot where locals gathered for over a century to celebrate royal birthdays and political milestones. Stepping off the lawn, our path leads us across the Anderson Bridge. Completed in 1910, this steel arch bridge was essentially the high-tech upgrade the city needed when the older Kavanagh Bridge couldn't handle the heavy traffic anymore. For my Australian viewers on Whatsanametravel, take a good look at these steel arches. The design is actually famous for its striking resemblance to the old Victoria Bridge in Brisbane. It's another one of those hidden physical tethers between our two countries. But this beauty has a dark past. During World War II, the Japanese military used these very steel columns to display the heads of suspected spies as a warning to the local population. It's a chilling contrast to the modern day energy here, where every September this bridge becomes part of the Formula One street circuit, with race cars thundering across these same arches at over 200 kilometers an hour. Looking at the grand facade looming over the river on our right, that is the Fullerton Hotel. Long before it was a 5-star resort, this was Singapore's General Post Office, or the GPO. It was the absolute beating heart of the city's communications. Every single road distance in Singapore was measured from mile zero right inside its lobby. And here is the ultimate crossover. Both of our nations share this exact architectural pulse. The same company that meticulously restored this Singapore landmark also acquired the legendary Sydney General Post Office at number 1 Martin Place. They transformed it into the Fullerton Hotel Sydney, preserving the same heritage feel we see right here. So whether you are at Martin Place in Sydney or crossing Anderson Bridge for National Day weekend, you are looking at sister buildings that were both originally grand post offices, keeping our two countries connected across the ocean. Happy National Day, Singapore. Drop a comment if you've stayed at either of these sister hotels. Hit subscribe to What's a Name Travel, and I'll see you on the next track.